hello, and welcome to Take This TV, the television book club podcast where each week we talk about an episode or two of our favorite shows and we talk about them with our friends in the fandom. That is you. Hello, I'm Carmen Askernes and I'm joined as always by the wonderful Kimberly Woods. Hello.
Hey, hey, hot potatoes.
This season we are watching Shogun. Oh my gosh, what an epic show.
I'm so excited. And today we are talking about the pilot episode, which is called Anjin, which also means pilot in Japanese. But it doesn't mean that type of pilot. They're talking about the character that we meet. The description of the show is destinies converge in Japan after a barbarian ship washes ashore in a poor fishing village. Meanwhile, in Osaka, Lord Toranaga finds himself outplayed by his enemies.
Does he ever? Yeah.
So that is the episode 1 description.
Oh my gosh. What did you think of this episode, Kimberly?
Oh my gosh, it's so gorgeous. Like, the look of the show is so epic and so beautiful, and yeah, I was just taken in with the visuals. What about you, Carmen? What did you think?
It does look great. I also was just like really just automatically hooked by what we start off with sort of like the political intrigue and drama of what's happening in Japan. And then we have sort of the pilot and the other pirates, I guess you could say, who land, who are sort of like marooned at sea for a while. And the captain, I guess, is giving up hope.
Yep, and has scurvy.
And has scurvy, which is a bad combination.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that's why he gave up hope, because he has scurvy, but it definitely sets the tone for the show right away.
It really does. And it takes place in 1600 Japan, so that's the lens with which we're viewing the show. For those of you that don't know, it's based on a book. The author was a POW in Japan. There was a show in 1980, and it was a huge cultural event. About a third of all households watched it.
Wow.
And apparently, Carmen, you can trace the rise of Japanese restaurants in America to this show.
What?
That's how impactful it was to introduce people to Japanese culture.
Wow.
Yep.
That's amazing.
So it was a pretty big event back then.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Dang.
But yeah, this looks to be pretty epic. Like you said, we start out on the seas. We meet the captain who has scurvy, and then we find out that this pilot, Blackthorn, has been trying to navigate them, and he says that he senses sand not too far below. He thinks there's land nearby, and then he ends up washing up on the shores of Japan.
Yeah. Like when I see people at sea and stuff, I feel like I'm always like, oh man, that's like a skill that I don't have. Like, I don't even think I have like the instinct to be able to be like, land is nearby. I can smell it in the air.
No.
I would definitely be dead. So.
Nope. The deep waters terrify me, and I can't even go deep sea fishing anymore. Like the first time I went when I was younger, I got seasick.
Oh.
So that would be a big nope for me.
So the pilot lands ashore, and he is convinced that he's made it to Japan, but the people that he runs into aren't as friendly and don't recognize what he is.
No, they don't. They capture him and his men, and then he's convinced that he's going to convince them that he's Portuguese, because during this time, the Portuguese are already here. They've been spreading their influence of Catholicism in Japan, but that doesn't really work out for him, does it, Carmen?
No, not even in the slightest. I do have to confess that when I watched this, I watched the dub for this first episode. So I was like, I wonder if he's like, if I watched the sub, if he would be speaking Portuguese.
Oh, that's interesting. He actually spoke English.
He did?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Because I was curious if it was like, if he was trying to pass it off as like, oh, I'm speaking Portuguese, but he's speaking English or not.
Yeah, for us it was English. I was like, oh, interesting. That's a cool
cool
choice. We see him, he does get an audience with one of the people in the village, in the small fishing village, and he's given a translator.
Who hates him.
Who seems to be a Catholic missionary who, notices that he's not Catholic, and so he's basically like, yeah, just kill this horrible pilot.
Yeah, he claims that he's a pirate and he has to die, and our pilot does step on the cross, which is an affront to the priest who feels like he has to die for his sacrilege. But the person that he's sort of like in front of. I remember like when I first any of these shows that are like big epics and you introduce all these characters, I have a hard time keeping up with everybody's name. So I'm just like, okay, he is somebody's uncle. So I was just like, this is uncle. That's how I was identifying this character. He's somebody's uncle, and he's also like an underboss of one of the five families that are sort of like in control
The 5
after the
regions, yeah.
passing of the was it the former shogun or who
Mhm.
okay, yeah,
I
so the
think
former
so.
shogun died.
Yeah. Which they've moved beyond now, right? Because
Yeah.
I think the main character, Yoshi Toranaga, who's played by Hiroyuki Sanada,
Yes, a
which we were
legend.
just talking about, Carmen, who we love. He's been in so many things like Westworld and John Wick and 47 Ronin. He's amazing. He's been acting since he was 5 years old.
Incredible.
Yeah, I lost my train of thought.
We
I
were
got caught
talking
up in
about
got caught up in Hiroyuki.
we were talking about how like his family or his house is one of the five controlling
Yeah.
houses.
Oh, and he was saying that the Shogun is a relic of the past at some point. Like during the episode, he mentions that's a relic.
Yeah, because he's a good man. Well,
Hmm.
I mean, he does adhere to the customs of the time period, which are pretty brutal in some instances. But for the time period, he's a good man.
But I do love that. Just a side note that this is like, we're getting Japanese culture. And obviously, it's a fictional story, but it's based on all of this, Japanese history and culture.
Yes,
So
I do
I
love
love
it. It's
that.
amazing. So let's talk about sort of what happens after the priest tries to get the pilot executed and is unsuccessful. So, um, hold on, I'm
Oh.
gonna use my little cheat sheet for a second. I'm gonna get better at this.
Okay. Well, I just remember at some point we cut to one of our pilot's men ends up being the one sacrificed. Like our
Right. Oh
pilot gets
my
to go
gosh.
stay and get a change of clothes and food, and then we get this horrible scene where it's like somebody being boiled alive,
Yeah, well, because like we
like
see the
screaming.
pilot and he's like, yeah, clean him up, give him a bath. And then we see people like building this fire with a cauldron. And it's like, oh, they're gonna bathe them in a cauldron, I guess. But no, they're burning someone alive.
It's pretty scary. But they only do that to one guy. The rest of his men are fine. you
And we
know.
also learned that like so the one of the consort is asking one of the attendants like why does he burn people alive and sit outside and listen, and they tell her that this particular general likes to see the moment of death when people realize that there's no escape and there's no hope, and he has a journal that we see him keeping of like what people do in their final moments, which is really sadistic. But we sort of get some insight into this person, and the consort sort of uses that information to discover that he's a voyeur, and uses that to find a way to please him later that night.
I also thought it was not funny, but I don't know what you want to call it. Interesting that he sat out there all night with his notebook and he was disappointed because apparently the guy didn't say anything in his final moments. So he was like, no, he didn't say anything.
Yeah, he said they were meaningless,
Yeah.
which is pretty
It's
hardcore.
like, okay. That's so interesting, Karma. I wonder, too, because you watch the dub, like how the translation is different.
Oh
If it's
yeah,
if there's like little subtleties that are different or it's the same.
I don't know. I feel
Curious,
like I should watch
curious.
it again. And yeah, because I feel
Yeah.
like I don't remember it like enough detail to be like, oh, this is like something.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, I think that the characterization that we see in this first episode gives us an idea of sort of where everybody stands, even in
Mhm.
like the power structure amongst these families. We get an idea of sort of how people's different temperaments and the temperament of the different leaders of the houses, how they have kind of like existed together, like sharing this power. And we
Mhm.
see that like there have been tensions amongst the five houses, but they've all promised and vowed that they will serve and share this power together.
Until the heir comes of age.
Oh
Because a
yes,
young heir is like, I don't know how old he's supposed to be, like 7? He looks like he's, I don't know, 7 years old or something? 5 years
yeah,
old?
he's just a little
Um,
kid, so it's gonna
he's a
be a
little
while.
baby, but it's already pretty tense. When we meet Hiroyuki Sanada, He's coming to speak to the rest of the 4 Bushos, and they basically accuse him of holding the mother of the heir hostage in his place. So it's a very tense moment. One of his men tries to speak up for him and say, you're insulting my lord, basically. And then that leads to a very unfortunate,
Oh my
consequences,
gosh.
because then he has to say that he's going to do seppuku and then offer up his own baby.
To end his bloodline.
Yeah.
When he had an outburst, I was like, okay, this guy's about to get murdered on the spot. But it was so much worse. It was so much worse. I mean, he volunteered to commit seppuku and to end his bloodline.
Yep.
But the part of me is like, is he dishonoring his family, or like, was that the only option? Was that the honorable thing to do?
Into it.
It's just his
It's kind of a
baby, his
shame.
infant son.
So, and then I think our main character, he was dead, that they would probably split his land. That's kind of how he's like
Yes.
convincing the rest of them to go along with this plan.
Yes. So he believes that there's a scheme that the other 4 houses have sort of divvied up his, what do they call it? His
Fiefdom?
fiefdom. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they've kind of like taken bids on his fiefdom, and they've kind of come to this alliance against him. Because, like you said, they have the ruse of like, well, you have the heir's mother in your homestead, and because you have her, she's a prisoner. But he tries to negotiate, saying that she's no more a prisoner than I am, and they claim that he's just using her as leverage so he can be safe while he's there. Um, and I mean, we're sort of like meeting all these characters for the first time, and we're partial to, is it Tanaka, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're partial to
Toranaga.
Toranaga. We're
Mhm.
partial to him because he's our perspective character. But for all we know, maybe the things they're saying are true. This is probably unlikely, but
Yeah.
um, we definitely see that like war is on the horizon, no matter what happens.
Yeah. And they're saying that, or, Toranaga's saying Shogun is a relic of the past. But obviously, this show is called Shogun, and there seems to be somebody's vying for power. Somebody seems to want to control all of the fiefdoms.
So, is it just me, or as much as I love Toranaga, he feels like he has Ned Stark energy? Did you watch Game of
He does
Thrones?
seem, yeah, no,
Okay,
he
yeah.
does have that kind of like noble, like honest, sincere, code of ethics about him.
Yes, he's an ethical
Yes.
man with a code. And even the one of the people he's talking to, his in his group, or a friend of his, like lets him know that like this is not the era of good men. Like we need a shogun. And so it makes me feel like, sort of similar to Game of Thrones and a lot of these other shows or historical epics where it's like in times of war, people can be really barbaristic and brutal and sort of like militants. So I'm curious if this is going to be his undoing, but
I don't
who
know.
knows?
I mean, they have an interesting theme too. I think somebody says one of the there's a Japanese saying that every man has 3 hearts. One
Oh
is in his
yeah.
mouth for the world to know, another is in his chest, known only by his friends, and finally there's the secret heart buried deep where no one can find it. So maybe our guy has a secret heart,
Oh
a
my
secret
gosh.
scheming heart. I feel like he has something we don't know yet is his agenda. Um,
I hope so.
right? I mean, plus he's played by Hiroyuki Sanada, so I assume. I mean, I get you could say the same thing about Ned Stark. If people hadn't read the books, you might have thought, Sean Bean or whatever would be around for a while.
Well, I mean, but like Sean Bean always dies in everything. And so does Hironada. He always dies in the stuff that he plays. So even in Westworld, spoilers. So I feel like they're setting us up to be like, it's gonna be this epic tale of how Toranaga becomes Shogun. And then in the next episode or something, he's gonna just get murdered.
I hope
Um,
not.
I hope not too, but
But
we'll
I am
see.
very intrigued by Mariko, who's played by Anna Sawai, who I just watched in Monarch recently, which
Oh,
she's really
hey.
great. I'm very intrigued by her character because we find out that she lost her father to seppuku because she
Yes.
seems to relate to Tadayoshi's wife, who has to give up the baby to end the bloodline.
Oh my
So she has that
gosh.
conversation with her about, you have to do it, and making sure that she's the last one to hold the baby, and um, just being very empathetic about that. So I'm very curious about like what exactly her history is. Is she married? Is her husband dead?
Oh yeah,
Do
because
we
I don't
even
think
know?
we see her. Well, is her husband the guy that we see in the small village? Is that her husband? Because
Is it?
Toranaga mentions her husband's away.
Oh.
Yeah, and so maybe that was him. I don't know. We don't know. So we will see. But um
Wait, which one in the village?
the general who sort of
The one that thought he was gonna come in and like, ha ha
and take
ha.
the ship. Yeah,
Oh no, I hope not. I don't like that guy.
yeah, he does kind of suck. I mean, he did boil somebody alive just to
Yeah.
hear them scream to death. So,
Yeah, I don't know. I
but
hope that's not her husband.
I hope not too. But I mean, I will say that like all of the characters are three-dimensional immediately because like you mentioned, we have that scene where she's talking to the family and trying to convince the mother that like, this is the right thing to do. Our ruler has decreed that your husband has to commit seppuku and end his bloodline. So this is the honorable thing to do, and you don't get the luxury of death. Which, like, is pretty hardcore, but I mean, it is also like that's their way of life, and she's
Mhm.
trying to help her understand that like this is the life that we chose to live. And
Yeah,
man, that was like a
it was
really
rough.
emotional scene.
And then later, Toranaga comes to Mariko, and basically he seems like because of what happened with her father, he's wanting to make sure she feels like she has a sense of purpose.
Yeah,
you
he does
know?
ask her like, "Are you loyal to me or are you loyal to your god?"
Yeah, because she's wearing a cross.
Yeah. But after
Which
she
is
after
really
she talks the wife down about her baby, she does go and pray in the room to herself and ask
Mhm.
to be forgiven for her sins. So we do see that she's struggling with her customs as well
Mhm.
as with her faith.
Mhm.
But she tells Toranaga that her loyalty is to the house.
And she says, "If I was just a Christian." Oh, 'cause he says something like, "Would your loyalty with God conflict with your service to me?" When he's
Mhm.
asking her to be a translator, because he's setting her up to be, the translator for our pilot, Blackthorn. And she says, "If I was just a Christian, but I have more than one heart." So there we get that whole heart theme again,
Yeah.
which is cool. I love that. I love that moment.
I love that too. I think that like we see people's inner lives. We get to see sort of like how they exist in this harsh but real world that they live in. And Blackthorn, right?
Mhm.
He is our pilot, and he is on his way to meet with Toranaga. But on the way, he runs into a new friend.
He was
Uh,
also his translator for a second, right? Again?
he was is Rodrigo, right?
Rodrigo or Rodrigo? Rodrigo?
I
I
think
think
it's
you're right.
Rodrigo.
I'm looking it up right now. Keep going.
Yeah, so he meets a new friend, Rodrigo, who is a Spaniard who has been working here for a while and sort of like is starting to understand the customs and is able to translate for Blackthorn and save his bacon essentially. And while they're sailing, Blackthorn sort of opens up to Rodrigo reluctantly because Rodrigo has his card and knows that he's a pirate. But they kind of bond over the fact that, this is a harsh life. And sometimes you have to do what you have to do to survive, which I
I
really
can't find
like.
it.
I mean, I think Rodrigo's is that his name?
I think it is. I can't find it.
Okay.
So we'll correct it later if it's not, but I think you're right. So we're just
Yeah.
gonna
If it's not Rodrigo, comment and add us on socials and let us know that we're wrong. But yes, he was my favorite character for
Or
sure.
I like the moment too where our pilot gets to show his stuff on the boat when they're in the middle of that storm.
Oh yeah.
Rodrigo's goes overboard. Oh god.
Immediately, he blasts off like Team Rocket, but
He throws
Blackthorn
him something to hang on to.
throws an oar out there, and I was like, he'll be back. He's
Oh
too
my
good of a character
gosh.
to die off screen.
Wow. We get this whole situation too where they try to go save Rodrigo, who's down at the bottom of a cliff.
Right. So when they get to land, Blackthorn's like, we don't leave anybody behind. have to go and find Rodrigo. And the general, we should look up his name. What is his name? I've been trying
There's
to
so many
dance around it
characters were
for so long.
introduced.
Like we were saying, like with these shows with so many characters, I remember the first time I watched Game of Thrones, I was like, I don't know anybody's name. And until people started to die off and the cast got thinner, I was like, okay, now I know people's names.
Yeah. I feel like it's only because I read the book. Like, if I didn't read the book, I feel like I would have been.
Super lost.
Yeah. And this, it was like, there's so much to take in, like the world, what's happening, all of the new characters, that it's like hard sometimes to retain different names.
We should make a family tree next time.
I can't see his name right now. But anyway, they go and they're on the search and rescue mission.
Yes, which I
Black,
thought was cool because he sort
yeah.
of sticks up for Blackthorn because there's another guy who outranks him. So there's Blackthorn who is the pilot. There is the general who was trying to pull one over on Toranaga, but was caught by Toranaga's right hand. Let's just define them that way for now.
Okay.
So Toranaga's right hand was like, "Whoa, hold on, Blackthorn. That's not how we do things around here." But the general was sticking up for Blackthorn, saying, like, yeah, he's on to something. Let's go save the other guy. Which goes back to my earlier point of like all the characters are so well rounded because we just saw this guy boil somebody alive earlier, but now he's like trying to save someone and ends up risking his own life to do it.
Partially because Blackthorn.
Because of toxic masculinity, yeah.
Blackthorn was like, oh, not knowing what was happening, was trying to read the situation like, oh, he can't look like a coward in front of his men, so I should let him go. And then the other guy looking at him like, oh, I guess I gotta go. The general feeling, I guess I do have to go.
His machismo would not let him say no.
But I do think that was funny because it's like you're trying to understand, they don't really understand each other. Like, they don't speak the same language, so they're trying to like read body language.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was interesting. But of course, our general tries to climb down, and Blackthorn's kind of shaking his head at the guy because two of his men are just holding him as he like starts climbing down the cliff. And of
Not
course,
very safe.
the rope breaks. He falls.
He falls pretty far.
I was like, ooh, he's a goner. But
I thought so too. I was like, he's dead.
it looked like it hurt. But no, he's hurt, but okay. He makes it down towards our guy Rodrigo. But he's like being buffeted by the waves.
Yeah.
It's not looking very good.
Tossing him like a salad, yeah.
And there's a moment where instead of, letting the waves take him, he's like, okay, it's time to do seppuku. So he draws his sword, but then,
They save him with another rope. But Blackthorn is shaken by that.
Yeah. It's like a revelation for him.
Which like, I know that was supposed to be like a big moment for that character. I thought it was kind of funny. Just because I feel like he was so emotional about it.
Yeah.
And like maybe it was like if we had been introduced to the idea of people committing seppuku with Blackthorn, maybe I'd be like, oh wow, the honor. But I was just like, okay.
Yeah. It's interesting just because there's so many elements of the culture that I feel like he was kind of witnessing along the way. A little bit, like the fact that they took him in, gave him clean clothes and dressed him nicely, gave him food. Like, maybe he was a little bit affected by that, but it was like this code of honor that like really, I felt the same way, Carmen. I was like, this is interesting. This is what you're like blown away by out of everything you've seen so far.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's something to do with him being a pirate. I don't know. We'll see.
I don't know. And also, it's just it's juxtaposed too because he had a captain earlier who committed suicide.
I forgot about that. Yeah, the like parallels. Yeah,
which isn't honorable in his mind, but then he sees the way that this guy's approaching death, and that is honorable to him.
Yeah, because he felt like his captain, was being a coward, the one who had scurvy. Because he said that's the coward's way out to that captain. But yeah, it is sort of like, I didn't put that together till you just said it, but it is sort of like his worldview shifting in that moment. And after that happens, they're back on the main ship. They're headed to Osaka, and he's talking to Rodrigo, who reveals that he knows the truth about Blackthorn, and that he found Blackthorn's diary.
Yeah. Yeah, it was called something in the show that I had to look up. I can't remember the name of it. I was like, "What is that term that they're saying?" Yeah,
Oh, they had
but
a
a
term
big
for it? He just said
yeah.
journal in the dub.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
There was, like, a different term, and I had to look it up. Say it in the comments if you remember it, because right now I'm blanking on it.
Yeah, let us
Uh,
know.
but yeah, which basically we find out through his journal that he was looking for a way to get to Japan, and along the way, they were supposed to, like, stop at different, Catholic sites and burn, those religious areas
Ay, ay,
on the
ay.
way.
Oh boy, a holy
Yep.
war.
He's a privateer.
Oh
People are
boy.
calling him a pirate, but he's a privateer.
Yeah. And so he attempts to cuff Rodrigo to death, murder him with a little cup, which would take a long time, I think. But luckily for Rodrigo, he has a gun, and so um, they reluctantly come to an agreement, I guess. Um,
Because
and
Rodrigo's a Spaniard, right? Who's
he
working with the
is.
Portuguese.
Mhm.
Yep.
And he was upset that Blackthorn was killing a lot of Spaniards
Mm.
with these different religious sites that he was burning.
What do you think for our Mariko? Are they setting up this love potential here?
Oh,
Because we don't
100%.
with Mariko and our pilot. Do you think?
100%. I mean,
Okay.
like, first of all,
As
I
as his translator, his
I
personal
just feel
translator.
like anytime that there's like super hot people, it's like you gotta have the super hot people making out. So I'm like, she's super hot and he's super hot, and they're like about to meet for the first time. I'm like, oh, they're gonna kiss. They're totally gonna kiss.
Okay, good. I was like, am I the only one thinking this? I feel like yeah,
You know what that
it's about
sounds
to
like to me,
converge.
Kimberly? That
What?
sounds like our first thirst tracker.
Ooh, thirst tracker.
So,
Yes.
if you've never experienced the glory that is our thirst tracker, what it is when we watch a show and there's a particular ship that we really want to happen, we rated each episode on this tracker that we like to call the thirst tracker, how thirsty we are for the ship. So, sounds like Mariko and Blackthorn
Blackthorn.
are our first ship.
Mari Thorn.
Mari Thorn. Oh my gosh, you heard it here first. Take this TV exclusive if it's not already out there in the fandom. Mari Thorn.
Yes.
Spread the
I'm
word.
excited. I'm so excited for this. Okay, Carmen, was it just me or Blackthorn's character, just a quick side note, who was
Mhm.
played by Cosmo Jarvis, he was giving me a little bit of like Rick Grimes
Rick
vibes, like
Grimes.
just at different points. Initially, I was like, he looks a little like Rick Grimes in this fantasy world.
First of all, I love Andrew Lincoln, and I think he is the best Rick Grimes. He gave so many quality memes over the years. I 100% felt that, especially after they cut his hair and he had that box
Yeah.
head going on. Yeah.
Okay, good. Just wanted to make sure.
He's Rick Grimes from now on.
Oh my gosh. I'm excited for the love story. I'm excited to find out what Torinaga's secret heart is.
Oh, yes. If he has one, or maybe he will just die tragically.
No!
So, are you loving this show?
I'm loving it. I can't wait
Heck
to
yeah.
just keep going deeper.
Heck yeah.
How about you, Carmen?
I love this show. I'm hooked by the culture, I'm hooked by the lore, I'm hooked by the characters. I think all the characters are so interesting, and I truly don't know what's going to happen, and I think that's the best feeling, especially after a pilot. So, can't
I'm so
wait.
excited. Well, thanks so much for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a review. Tell us what you thought on socials. We're at Take This TV on TikTok and Instagram. Thanks for watching. Welcome to the club. And remember, it's dangerous to watch TV alone.